Today, we're going through Why Women Deserve Less by Myron Gaines, Part 2. We look forward to it, and let's rustle some jimmies, because there is no sacred cows that are going to go untipped. Howdy.
Hi.
You doing good?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and continue on our survey of Why Women Deserve Less by Myron Gaines. He's the primary host of the Fresh and Fit podcast. So if you missed out on part 1, this is part 2. We'll finish out the rest of the basic content and give a couple of opinions on different things, because we've got lots of opinions. And let's get started. So when we left off last time, we kind of went through the old contract and the new contract and the pitfalls that Tom, Dick, and Harry had fallen into. Tom went ahead and had the awkward kind of pickup in high school, and he got shamed on social media. Dick was working super hard and had got a date, but then she flaked on him for somebody else at a fancy restaurant. And then Harry was on his third marriage and just like 2 divorces. He'd been cleaned out in the divorce courts a couple of times, and
Just a mess.
it's just a mess, and he doesn't have time to go ahead and recover and live a happy life anymore. So now we'll go ahead and kind of dig into some ugly truths and why the new contract, though it sounds good in theory, doesn't work in practice, because there's just some things that aren't being taken care of. So generally speaking, women just don't like men as much as men like women. It's just one of those deals, right? You could see that men chase after women, generally speaking. Men are the ones that ask women out on dates. These are responsibilities that we have. And even if you look at like dating apps like OkCupid and Instagram, you can go ahead and take a look at female preferences and see how swipe rates differ radically between men and women, where in an OkCupid study, it showed that women found 80% of men as unattractive, about 15% of men as okay, and only 5% of men as genuinely attractive. What do you think about that?
Modern women don't like men.
Well, I think it's all women, generally speaking, don't have as much of an affinity for men as men do for women.
There's no, in the modern script, there is no, in this new contract thingy, there's no onus on them. There's no motivation to go like, I need to go do this and do this and do this and go find a partner and go do, it's not, you can just go do everything yourself, and you just go and have your little tribe of girlfriends and go live your life, and the rest will figure itself out.
Kind of like the Sex and the City thing.
Yeah.
Where you just kind of live life fast and loose, and whatever comes, comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A good time, not a long time.
Yeah. Well, that's the prerequisite, right?
Right.
Is the good time is prioritized over the long time, because the feelings are the thing that's important in the here and now, as opposed to, hey, what are my priorities in the future, right?
You can see that in a lot of the long-term, like retirement funds being, contributed to, and all of this stuff. Not a whole lot of individuals from our generation and younger even think about it until they're halfway to retirement.
Sure. I would say that a lot of people don't really start thinking about retirement like on the average until about 30. And I think that 30 is right now the average age of first marriage in the United States. And so there's a lot of things going on between 18 and 30 in people's lives. And as a result, when people are getting later on in life, they're seeing the consequences of those actions, right? In the financial sense, you have compound interest that is working for you if you go ahead and invest early, and works against you if you're in debt that whole time. I mean, if you're in the market.
That's a big if.
Absolutely. But I think it's interesting in this deal where if you just look at who has been born or who has reproduced throughout history, about 80% of women have had babies throughout history, whereas only 40% of men have. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So there's some doubling up going on here. like at a minimum. And then you've also got situations where in the far past, you had a lot of men dying young due to war or famine or things of that nature. And they never had an opportunity to just grow into maturation and have a family of their own.
I mean, we talked about this kind of a little bit where it's like men are expendable.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because they go to war and they go to, and all of this stuff, and they're the ones doing all the things to provide for, you know, the cave, the little nest, you know, at home. And that's not enough. It's not enough for women to like, they have to say men are expendable because we're replacing them, not just because things are happening and they're like out there, you know, slaying dragons and bringing home treasure for us. And that, you know, sometimes the dragon wins.
Sure. And not only that, like sometimes the man is not a hero climbing mountains and slaying dragons. Maybe he's more likened to a workhorse where the owner of the workhorse gets to go ahead and select how often the workhorse works and when they've had enough rest. So you see this in a modern context a lot of times when a dude just goes ahead and sits on the couch and tries to enjoy the game, and the wife comes up and nags him to do something as soon as he gets home. Yeah. It's like, you're home. That means you need to work now. It's like, I just got done with work. What are you talking about?
Never mind all of the other things that he's already done.
Never mind any of that. It doesn't count. The question is, what are you doing for me right now? And the thing is about a workhorse is you can just keep whipping them and whipping them. And when they pass, you can go back to the market and find another one. Right? And you try to deal with them discreetly and off you go to the market.
Are you talking about off you go to the glue factory?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to go and have enough respect to go ahead and use that much. But a lot of times I think men are treated as disposable workhorses when they don't have presence of mind to maintain frame in their relationship.
Under the old structure, old contract, they understood that, they knew that, and they were fine with it because they were getting something out of that.
Wait. So you mean that if they're giving something, there can be some expectation of reward? That's crazy.
Here's the thought.
Okay, yeah. So what were they getting in return for that?
They were getting to procreate, to leave their genetic material behind. They were working for a purpose.
Sure.
And, you know, more of what our personal like ideals and values are as far as legacy and, you know, leaving the next generation in a better place than we were given.
Right.
It's an archaic notion.
I think that most people, when they become parents, have the inkling that they would like their children to have a better life than they had. And I don't think that's particularly archaic.
No, but the conscious working out of the how.
Well, I think
it's nice to want things. It's good to want things.
It's good to want things, but you got to go ahead and actually put some effort into things.
That's
what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the struggle.
Right. So just because you want something doesn't mean you're taking the steps and the actions and maintaining the behaviors for that to be so. Okay. I mean, in a lot of ways, modern conveniences have made life substantially better in our lifetime than it had been in generations past, just by the nature of technological advancement.
Yeah, and getting us to a place where we can think about these things a little bit more mindfully, because we don't have to worry about food, clothing, shelter in the same way that generations past had.
Sure.
Like, I don't have to go and take all of the clothing to a stream and go beat it on a rock and all of that stuff. I can put it in my washing machine, you know, and then go put the dishes in the dishwasher and then go read to my kids.
So you're saying that because of technological advancement, maintaining the home takes substantially less time now than in times past.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot more time for leisure, maybe, or in a modern context, a lot of times women are just going out and working now.
Yeah.
Instead.
That's the thing.
Which is fine as long as it makes sense in accordance with their priorities.
Is the deficiency in culture that kind of makes me a little sad. It makes me sad in my heart.
That like, people aren't looking.
That is kind of how we find ourselves here.
Well, yeah. I mean, we also have got a series of principles that got us to where we're at because we took a measure of what the cost was and we were willing to pay it along the way.
Because we are just countercultural.
And we're working to something greater.
Definitely.
Right. And it didn't matter what the culture was saying at the time because we were acting of our own accord, regardless of the pressures from the outside.
But that I'm saying, like, in a wider sense, like that is how we are where we are culturally.
Sure.
Like more broad spectrum. And yeah, that's great that we had that drive to work consciously to set this up. But it is a rarity in this culture.
Okay, sure. Getting back to the idea that women just don't like men as men like women. How often do you hear of women asking guys out on a date? It just doesn't happen, right?
Crickets.
Yeah, crickets, right? So they can say that it's important for them to find a man. But if you go ahead and judge their behaviors, the behavior doesn't match the words. And there was a couple of surveys done recently that shows that millennial women rank finding a man as 7th in their overall list of priorities, behind career, behind finding a higher education to pursue, and going traveling. Going traveling went up higher on their list of priorities than finding a life mate.
And it's like good, bad, indifferent, like it is very telling of the time we live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another thing is that there's a huge difference in sex drives between men and women. I mean, we understand that to be the case. It's not often that we hear of women complaining that their men don't go ahead and give it to them enough. Have you ever heard that complaint? It's very rare.
It is very rare, and it is very much in a specific demographic.
Okay. Well, which demographic are you talking about?
The rare unicorns like we are.
Oh, okay.
Where, especially in those who are, quote unquote, unequally yoked, where they, like boy meets girl, and they kind of dance around the idea that they want to pursue like a traditional family structure and all of that stuff.
Okay.
But they don't consciously do enough to fight the cultural imprint that has been laid on them.
Okay.
Sort of like, when I came from, my mom is a single working mom, and like, she was like, I don't need no man kind of thing, because she'd just been burned so badly.
Sure.
And she was just so wrapped up or enveloped in not necessarily a career, but just keeping a stable job to provide for a child, me, as an only child. And then she had more like /child/children/ her family unit that she's left with. And that had an effect on me still, where I was just like, well, I'd love my spouse to lead, but whatever's there, still that modern little bug in your ear going, whatever's left over, you got to pick up the slack, which means they're still part of my own agenda that kind of is left there, that I have a certain idea of what needs to happen, or like in general, this person's spouse doesn't do, they have to pick up the slack.
Sure. And it just adds to their emotional burden or whatever.
Like if I believed that we needed to have cable and we needed to have 2 cars that were a certain number of years old, I had a preconceived notion of the kind of lifestyle we needed to maintain, rather than just letting you dictate it and just kind of going, we don't need all this other fancy stuff. We have different priorities so we can get there. If it was just like, I'm in this bubble where I need to do this thing right here, and you're not doing enough in my estimation, I need to pick up the slack, but you're doing most of it. So you're leading. You're not actually living a traditional family structure.
Sure. And it's interesting, right? Because a lot of times the whole keeping up with the Joneses thing is what goes ahead and keeps people trapped, is they go ahead and look at other people's best on social media and assume that that is the wholeness of their life, as opposed to understanding that a lot of times people use it as window dressing. They go ahead and show off the best that they have.
Yeah.
And they keep all the other stuff under wraps. So it gives a false impression to people. And who's the most prolific users of social media?
Women.
Women are, right? Mm-hmm. So they get these ideas of what life should be, and they move the goalposts on, hey, what are our standards? And then you end up in this struggle where you end up having to do the 2-income household thing in order to keep up.
To what your impression of what should be, rather than, we need to, what we can really live with.
Right. It is deciding what's important and what's not. And a lot of times people have difficulty defining priorities and understanding what's really important.
Yeah.
And so they end up trapped in a prison of their own creation. Yeah.
They let culture dictate to them. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, the people who, the influencers, whatever. And it's funny because, when I first became a wife and a mother, it was Pinterest, that Pinterest syndrome, where they show all the pretty stills. Now there's like video and people live in life all the time, going shopping and showing what they bought all the time. And you're just like inundated with this. And so where you get a moving, more in-depth picture of what you think should be.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting, right? Because generally speaking, women are more susceptible to propaganda and emotional storytelling, generally speaking. So things like the elation that comes with retail therapy on those kinds of videos rubs off on women, and they end up with more consumer spending and all these other second and third order effects. Yeah. And more consumer debt as a result of it, right? Because of the emotional nature of the way that they operate, which is neither here nor there. It's just what is.
It's like, let's just, be aware. Let's like put that into our individual consciousness.
Sure. Now let's go back to the sex drive thing.
Right.
So on average, there's this study done, and gay couples have about 6.5 times more sex than lesbian couples do. Kind of telling about
let that marinate for a second.
Let it sit in. Right? So if you were to go ahead and do maths on that, that's about 15% of what the men's sex drive is if you're looking at just homosexual relationships between men and women as a data point. Another data point to consider is women only consume about 4% of the corn, and only about 1 in 25 sex workers are men. There's just not that much demand for it, because who's spending the money on it? The people that are having a hard time getting that which they are trying to consume.
Because again, go back to the first point where it's like women don't want men as much as men want women.
Well, that, and not only going back a couple of episodes where we're like, hey, any woman can go to the bar and wear a sign that says open for business, and she would have no problem
to line up
just have a whole line out the door for short-term carnal gratification.
For a good time.
Maybe a good time. Who knows, right? The quality of what she's getting.
So you're just saying a time.
A time. Yeah, it's a time.
Not necessarily a good time.
Sure, because there's no guarantee of what's going on there.
That's funny.
But, right, like there's this huge difference in the acquisition of sexual access and things of that nature, where it's so much easier for women than it is for men because of the nature of what's going on here. Generally, women are gatekeepers of sex and men are gatekeepers of relationship and commitment. So we went ahead and talked about the differences in sex drive between men and women. And I would say that women, generally speaking, are choosier than men are in terms of who they want for relationship. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's important for women to be protective about who they choose as a mate.
Yeah, especially if you're in it for a long time, because ostensibly you get married and you don't get married just to get divorced like 6 months later. But, it is what it is. But you're choosing this partner that ostensibly you want to grow old with. You want to weather the storms of life and all of that stuff. So you don't just, when you're shopping for a house, you don't just go like, look at the outside and look at the spec sheet and go, seems good. You need to go like walk in it, feel the vibes, right?
Oh, like you got to inspect a boat.
Yeah.
And see what's going on with that.
So, any big life decision, hopefully you're not just going.
On the other side of it, like when you go and buy a house, you don't just walk in and go, I love it. I want to buy it right now. That's not the right way to do that. But you see that's how a lot of these things happen.
Yeah. More and more where it's like, and even now it's creeped into the repertoire and the rhetoric that like, oh, well, if it doesn't work out, we can just get divorced. It's fine.
Yeah, it's a little bit more flippant in nature, right? Like, the idea of the long-term commitment is a little bit more casual nowadays than I would say in times past, where because of no-fault divorce and all these things, it's like, oh, hey, we're making a commitment for now. Now, I think that one solution to the current marriage problem of all the things that are going on with marriage and how it's really terrible for dudes is to go ahead and have marriage be like a term thing that you sign up for over and over again. Right? That way you can go ahead and have this time where you renegotiate your terms and go, hey, this is where we're at. What do we think about this?
I mean, if you take it to its furthest conclusion, then yeah, because I don't think people understand enough that this is a contract. It's transactional, and there should be, I want this and this, and you provide this and this, and good. All right, cool. Handshake, let's go.
Yeah, but that goes back to enforceability, right? The things that men typically want from women are things that cannot be enforced in a court of law, whereas the things that women typically want from men are enforceable in a court of law. So that's where there's some difference there. But if it's just on a term basis and the woman has not been providing her services as agreed upon, and that gives him a clean break at the end of the 5-year term or whatever, that seems like a great thing because it provides both sides of the coin an incentive to be good for their own sake and for each other's sake.
You heard it here first.
Right, but the thing is, there's a difference between like the starfish and like enthusiastic submission, right? Right? There's a big difference between like dragging someone kicking and screaming and for someone to be screaming in another way, in a good way. They're very different things.
That was so funny.
Oh, last night?
Used it in church.
Yeah,
it was hysterical. And you could just tell everybody knew what's up.
Everybody knew what was up.
But everybody's looking at me like, I'm like, don't look at me. I'm compliant. Don't even get it twisted. He's not talking about me.
No, that was really funny, though, because it's interesting because we don't talk about it a lot as a society in like mixed company. But there's like truth to that because we all know that there's a big difference between when you're actually hot and heavy and when it's just tepid, like, obligation.
Well, just like with the contractual like negotiation in preparation for a marriage relationship.
Like a prenup?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not even a prenup, just like, how do you see us running our family? That kind of stuff. Like all those kind of conversations we had years off from like even getting engaged. We knew that we were going to get there, but it was so good to actually just hash that thing out. Like just to see, like, what do you see, where do you see us? How do you see us, when we have kids? Like, how do you see, even like house responsibilities? We bought a house. So pretty much I'm seeing like everything inside the house is like my responsibility. Everything outside on the exterior or outside the house is your stuff that you kind of handle.
Sure.
Like, even before we had children to have free slave labor. I mean, take on more responsibility of stuff. I was like, can you take the garbage out? Like, I'll gather it all up, but like, can you take it outside of the house? And it made it also cleaner, but like, also like, if anything inside the house and it breaks, well, that's part of what I need you to do.
Sure.
But like cooking, cleaning, household responsibilities, the whole thing, saying I'm out of deodorant and then deodorant like appears on the bathroom counter.
Oh, you're talking about the thing on social media.
And so all of those things where it was like everybody's talking about the mental load of parenting and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, because that's my job. So
going back to women are choosier than men, I think that reproduction and just having kids is kind of the most important decision that a woman can make in terms of her biology.
Especially the fact that you have to make it in a certain amount of time.
Sure. For the most part, yeah, I got it. We have IVF and things of that nature, but generally speaking, the fertility of a woman is highest in their early to mid 20s.
Again, fighting your biology.
I mean, it's just a fact of life. Mm-hmm. Part of that whole reproduction business is a lot of times women will mistake the men who will sleep with them as the men who will commit to them, where they'll go ahead and go for a good time and assume that it's for a long time. Why do you think that is?
Because we are the gatekeepers of what we are the gatekeepers of. We're supposed to be the gatekeepers to sex.
Okay.
You're supposed to be the gatekeepers to relationships.
Okay.
So some women, especially in this culture where it's more ambiguous, there's less, of a societally accepted moral code. It's way more, oh, well, you should try to. But if you do, be safe or be smart. Okay, cool. But in no way are we saying don't protect yourself against STIs and all of that stuff. Cool. But as a society, if you're like, if I end up pregnant and I don't have a husband, everybody's going to look at me. And there was all that societal pressure. There isn't anymore. And so now you have this kind of this laxity in that societal pressure to jump the gun a little bit. Well, maybe I can get this guy if I give a little bit more than I should. And it was always like you just kind of push the boundaries.
So do you think it's just a way that they try to use intimacy as a way to get in the door for a better relationship?
Yeah, physical intimacy as essentially bait for emotional and mental intimacy, the ones that will really give a relationship the staying power.
So do you think it's fair to say that it is some women's strategy, consciously or unconsciously, to go ahead and prioritize a sexual relationship ahead of a committed relationship and then switch up after the fact once they've gotten the commitment?
Absolutely. What we see a lot of is that commitment never comes because
they get stuck in situationships.
Well, it's just like, if I do this, then this will happen. Did you guys talk about that? No.
No, it's just an assumption.
Are you mad at me? No, I'm fine.
I'm just disappointed.
It's like, what did I do? I'm not going to tell you because you should know.
Okay. Going back to mind reading.
So you have this rearranging of priorities and just going too far, too fast and expecting the rest to keep up.
Do you think that there is something to people wanting to take time and get into a relationship and wait for kids to come and then take away some of the sex off the table? You think that's a thing that happens?
I definitely don't think that's a conscious thing that happens, for sure, because it will naturally happen. Because as your priorities, your focus, your energy, your financial resources, your emotional capacity, and your bandwidth is sapped by children, you're just not going to have enough of a spouse or a partner and a mom to go around.
Do you think that that's a matter of priorities more than anything else?
Yes and no.
Right, because sometimes you're just not going to have the spoons for it.
Yeah.
Right? And other times, I think that space is not held for that purpose in our culture.
Definitely. And I mean, the thing is, if you do have the emotional intimacy and, built a relationship and a marriage rather than just a physical, you're hot, I'm hot, let's get it poppin'. When those things come in and distract you, I'm not saying that children are oh, such a nuisance and a distraction. I'm just saying they're logistically going to demand your time and energy. But if you have that relationship foundation, when that happens naturally, you are going to want to prioritize, or at least when your spouse comes and says, hey, I feel a little neglected, I can help a little bit more with the kids so that we can like have more time, set aside more time and stuff like that. Kind of, there will be that give and take and that conscious effort to make time to connect more, even physically. But that if you don't build a proper relationship first, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think that a lot of guys fall into the trap of something like chore play, where the woman convinces the guy that, oh, hey, if you just do the dishes, I'll have more energy for you.
Well, when this relationship is built backwards anyway, you almost have to like dangle the carrot that way rather than, and that'll be more of a Band-Aid and not really a solid solution.
Right. Because the way that I see it is, even if you do all the things, you're signing up for forced or for like tepid compliance.
Starfish.
You're setting yourself up for some starfish
like,
action.
Okay,
here,
let's get over.
Right? Because it's like, okay, I came up with it. I agreed to this. I guess. Sure. Let's go. And like, let's be honest. That is so far from what I would desire ever that it's like, it's not worth it. Why would I go ahead and do this?
And that's not the kind of physical access, sexual access, physical contact that's going to propel a relationship forward.
Sure. And also, I think that what happens with guys is they end up in a desert and they're just looking for a drip of water. They're just looking for anything.
That is sad.
And because of that, they accept that as the norm because they don't have all these other things in place to keep their relationship going in a way that they are respected and cared about, and that the women are loved and cherished in a way that they would naturally do this of their own accord.
Enough of that. There's times where it's like, there's a dry spell or, stuff's happening and whatever. But if that becomes, again, that long-term situation where that's what you're used to, then you're like, why are you sitting there just begging for scraps?
Right? Something's got to change if that's the situation. And I think a lot of people, that's why a lot of people end up getting divorced, right? When men are filing finally, because we addressed earlier that 70 to 80% of divorces are filed by women. And if they're college educated, it's 90% of divorces are filed by women. But the number one reason why a man goes ahead and files for divorce, aside from infidelity, is lack of intimacy within the home, right?
Yeah.
So number one and number two reasons both have to deal with intimacy for men. So you can see that it's incredibly important, but when there is a mixed match of expectations and a mixed match of how we prioritize ourselves and each other, you're going to end up with that problem so often where you just end up accepting less and it becomes the norm.
And then when she finally puts out, essentially.
And then it's starfish.
It's just meeting a physical need.
Right.
That's all it's doing. Rather than being part of the, an element in the full spectrum of things that forge a relationship closer. And,
there's a big difference between just hitting it
yeah,
and having an emotionally stirring, connecting experience between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Very different thing, which is why like starfish is not acceptable. Like if that's what you're getting, my guy, you probably need to go ahead and move on.
And then you've got like 2-minute Johnny.
Oh my gosh. It is hilarious, right? Because you hear these complaints in the society so much that like dudes don't last or they're not meeting the needs. And it's like, well, here's the thing, guys, when you know what you're doing, things go really well. So take the time and know your woman because women want to know and be known. So know her in all the ways.
Yeah.
And chances are things are going to go great.
But I get it because when there's that dry desert begging for scrap situation, well, yeah, after 2 minutes, it's like, oh, and we're done.
Right. And
like,
it's
that's
just
really happening.
And it's just disappointment all across.
But yeah, and then that's just meeting a physical need rather than, this whole like creating an ambiance and an experience for just a time to connect on multiple levels.
Right.
Not just one.
Right. But the thing is that men, sexual intimacy is typically a really connecting experience between him and his spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if he takes his time to enjoy himself and for them to enjoy each other, it's a great thing. And it's really sad when you end up with a situation with the desert. But a lot of times, even if like a woman is not so inclined, but is compliant to in a positive way, usually there's no regret involved. Like usually it's fun and good things happen. And if the dude's really good at it, a lot of good things happen. Right. But the trick is a lot of dudes just don't put in the time to get really good at it.
They're just not super good at it. And worse yet, they don't want to be good.
Right.
Because she probably won't appreciate it anyway.
Do you think it's a lack of appreciation, or do you think it's sometimes a lack of experience too?
I think it goes further when both kind of like are in it for the journey to figure it out. Like, I'm pretty sure most people will say that they're like first time, probably pretty bad.
Yeah, because that on average, your first time, you have no experience, you have no idea what you're doing.
Especially if you go into it with with both people with a body count of 0. And you're just like, this is what the hemming and hawing was about? Really? Why?
Yeah. And then you end up figuring it out over time if you're willing to put in the work, like anything else in life.
If you just know this one person and you get to know all the things like that they like, even when it morphs, like, your taste buds change every 7 years, kind of like that kind of thing. It's like if your different preferences change, you still like in tune to change little things over time. I'm pretty sure we are not the same kind of people in that arena that we were.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's pretty normal across relationships long term, is that your customs and your habits change. And if you are keen to keep up and make adjustments, generally speaking, you'll be better off. But I think that a lot of times people do not take the time to really understand what's going on. And so you end up with those situations.
Yeah, they don't even know themselves, let alone another human being.
Yeah. So we went ahead and hit up the ugly truth, how women just don't like men as much as men like women, because men will just go ahead and go for it, and women will take their time. And unless the guy is of a super high caliber, they're not going to go ahead and make a move.
Well, especially in that time frame of first contact. We talked about it before about, looking up like people and stuff. Like the women use the internet way, way too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those, like if you get like a TikToker and stuff telling me this person was such a Karen, blah, blah, blah. People will find out where they are, where they live, where they work.
All right. We also went in the difference between men and women's sex drives and kind of how women are choosier than men, generally speaking. So that's kind of the ugly truth as to why elements of the new contract just don't really work. And next, we'll go ahead and explore the impact of the internet on dating. According to an OkCupid study, women found only 5% of men actually attractive, and they found 80% of men to be unattractive, just looking at pictures. We've talked about that a little bit. We know that because of influence in social media, that the goalposts of what a life should be, they constantly move because there's always this influence going on. And now here's the part where we can dig in a little bit. Women are constantly bombarded with attention and offers for intimacy from men. How do you think that goes ahead and affects the women's psyche if they're just constantly getting hit up in their DMs?
Oh, that is going to make you selfish as all get out, like so self-absorbed because you're just constantly like, it's constant attention, you're constant like almost like adoration. But sometimes, it's even adoration from creepers on the internet. Like people saying creepy stuff on the internet. Like it's mainly dudes and it's like not a good look, but okay. You're just going to think that you're just God's gift to humanity.
Yeah, you think that'll inflate their egos a little bit?
Oh, just a little.
Just a little bit? Yeah, because if they think that they can get whatever, it really affects the way that they perceive people's advances, right? So going back to the whole don't be creepy on the internet, look at the camera and be like, dudes, do not be creepy on the internet.
Please don't be creepy.
The internet is forever, it turns out. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So let's get into that. Like, what do you think is the deal with women using social media to be a private investigator?
Like, the universal truth I'm seeing is women use the internet way, way too much, and men use the internet way too little. They don't use it enough, especially in this way. So, like, if this one chick is like, oh my gosh, this guy just like did all this stuff and he was like terrible human being, help me find him. All the coven of the internet sleuths will unite and they will find where they live, where they work, and all like emails and whatever. And they will almost form a virtual lynch mob.
Oh, you know what that brings to mind? The whole, like, are we dating the same guy in a given city?
Yes.
That group on Facebook, it's like, oh, are we dating the same guy, San Angelo? Are we dating the same guy, Abilene?
Yeah.
And like,
didn't that start on Craigslist?
I think it did, but it ended up going to Facebook groups. And I remember you used to go ahead and, look through those just for the drama.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was one in particular that was a couple of hours from here. So it was just like, really?
It's enticing to go ahead and see all the chisme. And like you said, the whole coven came to form a virtual lynch mob.
Yeah, it was wild. But then it was like they used this one thing to bond over, this one like happenstance. And then more like copycat kind of situations kind of trickled out from that. And it was so interesting. And it really, if you think about it, if people like if a gaggle like goes to a bar or whatever, meets like, somebody meets this dude and she gives her number out and this guy actually takes the time to call and wants to like get together, then the amateur background check begins. And they'll see like what this person's posting and blah, 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 blah. And that's why don't be creepy on the internet.
Well, yeah, that's one reason to not be creepy on the internet.
But I think if I flip the script a minute and think about it, do guys do that?
I think generally speaking, men do not use social media that way.
No, only in like a weird situation if he thinks she's cheating.
I think that men should take some time to go ahead and look at what a woman posts on her social media.
That is definitely my take on it and my PSA to the world. Dudes, if you really want to get to know a chick, even before you have a first date, go look at social media. Like going back to episodes about the red flags and all of that stuff, because honestly, their profile pictures and stuff like that, and even those wacky public posts that they share and regurgitate, you're going to learn a lot about their point of view, even with things like who comments on their stuff. All of that.
You're going to get their profile is public or private.
Yeah, you're going to get a full and robust picture of this person before you even have a 5-minute conversation, really.
It's those things that they make public too.
Yeah.
Right. So not only do they have these things going on, they are out for everybody to see, which is different, right? Because a lot of times you'll have women that just have private social media, which I think is generally speaking the best move for women that are not looking for a relationship to go ahead and get away from a lot of the nonsense. But for women who are looking for a relationship, the idea of being found on a public profile, you're inviting a certain kind of energy into your life by doing that.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how you can learn a lot about their political leanings. You can learn a little bit about whether they have kids and whether they are very free of their self in public. And there's a lot that can be told just by taking a few minutes to take a look at even some basic profile searches on Instagram and Facebook or whatever your social media of choice is.
Yeah. I mean, corporate entities do that too when you're interviewing for a job.
So let's see. We also talked about how there's a deluge of options shown every day. That's kind of the same thing as being bombarded with attention. And then you end up with a situation like the husband store where, you can just keep going and going until you've got nothing left. And that's often what happens. Technology also makes available the option to directly transact beauty for a living. It's like a global stripper pole.
Oh my gosh.
Right? You go ahead and...
Why are you going to say it like that?
Well, I mean, hey, if you're going to go ahead and solicit yourself in such a way to get money for the way that you look, only the way that you look, and what things you do while you're looking, however you decide to look, that says something. And because of technology, this opens up this whole economy to this, where women directly are transacting their beauty for money. Whereas a lot of times in times past, it was kind of like in the corners of the world where, hey, there's all these regulations about where you can and can't have a strip joint. If you're going to go ahead and have corn shoots, you can only do it in this part of town or this part of town. It's pretty interesting to see how in people's faces it's become, because it's just going on people's Facebook feeds now, where you just end up with these women that are doing their thing to get people to sign up for their private service.
But again, people are still not actually talking about it. And when you do, you're a creeper.
Right. But it's a reality of what's going on in the world. And I think that it's interesting because if you ever shame these decisions by women, the whole lynch mob comes for you.
Yep.
Because they're like, hey, we want to go ahead and defend this as her right to choose. And it's like, fine, she has the right to choose that, but she doesn't have the right to choose the consequences that come with that. Right. It's just reality that she's going to bear shame and scorn because of it. And she's not going to be a genuine option for the kind of man she probably wants to have.
Again, it's where they say they want one thing, but they're doing everything in it's a contradiction.
They want all the freedom without the responsibility. It's kind of like the obesity thing again, right? It's, hey, I don't want to be disqualified on this basis. That's really what it ends up being. It's about, hey, I don't want people to look over me just because of this. And it's like, I'm sorry, there are fundamental realities at work that you don't have the power over. But you do have choices of what you do in these circumstances. Like, you get to choose whether you're going to go ahead and take your clothes off in front of a camera. Come on. Like, the vast majority of the time, nobody's putting a gun to your head in order for that to be a thing. These women are willingly choosing this life in exchange for the monetary benefits that they get. Or sometimes it's not even a monetary benefit, because the average creator on the most prominent platform to do this is only making $100 a month. So they're looking at these like top of the top performers and seeing the millions that they're raking in and thinking, oh, hey, I can go ahead and cash in on this. But they don't want to bear the consequences associated with it. They just want the money without any of the responsibility.
Fast money.
Oh, yeah. It turns out that fast money often comes with slow problems.
But it's interesting that they want, women want their right to make their own choices and live their lives the way they want to. But others aren't allowed to make their own choices in reaction to that.
Right, because if a man has a preference, it's my patriarchy or it's misogyny or whatever. I'm saying misogyny wrong on purpose just to make fun of it.
That was an intentional thing. Don't
totally
get it twisted.
Yeah. It's misogyny.
Yeah.
Right? And women, they can go ahead and have any preference they want.
But when they want 6 feet,
6 inches, a six pack, 6 figures, blue eyes, trust fund, finance, all these things.
I won't settle.
Right. And here's the thing. Don't settle. Get what you can get in the marketplace. And if it turns out that you can't get what you want and you don't settle, hey, at least you're living life in accordance with your priorities. A lot of times they don't want to put their money where their mouth is, and that they'll end up having to settle if they're going to have long-term companionship, because they realize too late that people are hiring the class of 25 right now. Turns out there's a new crop of 18-year-olds every year.
Well, more girls turn 18 every day.
Sure.
But it comes from this thing I actually showed you on social media where it was like a strip joint and it said now hiring and then it said class of 2025, like 2 different lines. And it was like, do you know what you just did there?
They know exactly what they just did. They knew what they were up to. That was an intentional choice. But there's truth in that. But here's the thing. Then you'll end up with the age shame where you're like, oh, you're 25 and you want to date an 18-year-old? Why are you doing that? Do you just want to go ahead and oppress them? It goes to the oppression narrative where, once again, it's a matter of they don't want to be disqualified. Like when 40-year-old women shame 40-year-old men for wanting to date 25-year-olds because, hey, they look great. And the 40-year-olds typically have hit the wall by then. Look, you're just shaming their preference and trying to find ways to guilt men into fitting in line with your priorities. Because, oh, now you're looking to settle down and the guys that you want to settle down with aren't interested in you.
But it's interesting because they're saying, oh, that's so wrong and that's so disgusting and blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, like, there's some 40, 50-year-old homeboys can roll up to the club and walk away with not even just one, but multiple, 20-something-year-olds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you work on yourself and you've got game and all of that, you absolutely could. And then those very same guys are the ones that the 40-year-old women really would want. And so they try to shame them into compliance. But the guys that are doing that aren't going to stop because the guys that are doing that are at the apex of where they're at. Whereas those very same 40-year-old women, when they were in their early 20s, when they were at their hottest, they were going ahead and enjoying their optionality. But the thing is, hey, if they were not making the choices to end up with their long-term satisfaction when they were in a position to have their best negotiating strength, now they're going to go ahead and shame these guys for doing the very same thing when they are at their apex of negotiating strength.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. It's freaking crazy. Like, why would a guy that's put in the work want to go ahead and deal with that? Especially since a lot of these 20-somethings want that man too. It turns out they all want that guy.
Yeah.
Because he put in the work. And it turns out it's really hard to be that guy. It reminds me of that female delusion calculator based on Department of Labor statistics that Fresh and Fit had pulled up, where they'd go ahead and ask women on the panel, hey, what is your ideal guy? And they'd list off things like, hey, he needs to make at least $125,000. He has to be at least 6 foot. He can't be obese, whatever racial preference.
This is the one with the kitty litter scale.
Right. And a lot of times they don't realize that only about 15% of the population in the United States that are men is making 6 figures right now. And even fewer still, only 10% of dudes are about 6 feet. And if you're looking at 6'2" or more, 6'2", it's less than 5% of the population that are men are 6'2". So when you have these preferences, you end up narrowing your scope in such a way that it is harder and harder to find the guy. But by all means, don't settle, right? If you want these guys and you have the best negotiating power in your early 20s, then get it. Get what you can get when you can get it, right? And if the guy has put in the work to become a man with options, he gets to choose at that point. But it's really funny because for that 10 years of time that he's putting in the effort to make himself something, all these women won't give him the time of day until he becomes something, and they're waiting at the finish line.
It's like, let's call a spade here. Like, who's the shallow one?
You're asking a rhetorical question, or do you want an actual answer? No. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Right? And like, dudes are shallow in one dimension, right? Physical beauty. That's generally what they pick for. But if you go ahead and look at female preferences, they're shallow for other things.
They have a lot more metrics that they throw out there to vet, who they want to especially have relationships with. Like,
or how they disqualify people.
Yeah.
But they're just preferences.
I mean, and even the study at the beginning, it's like the curve of the data, like, it's so polarizing.
Sure.
They're
We look through the
yeah.
data. The guys are just, hey, look, they can tell what a 10 is and what a 1 is. And there's a bunch in the middle. So it's like an actual bell curve. But on the women's chart, the bell curve was centered around 3. And they had like this little bump right around 8.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Whereas like they're either like really, really hot and like, okay, yeah, I do that. Or just everybody else is a no. There is no in between. There is no maybe pile ever.
Right. Or at least on first impressions. Right. And I think that a lot of times we look at the data for these first impressions thing and fail to realize that when you get to know somebody, then things even out a little bit in terms of like men and women dating. But right now, since dating apps are kind of like the norm now, that whole first impression look is a filter.
Swipe right.
Swipe right is a filter for these things. And you never get to the point where you get to know somebody for who they are if you don't go ahead and make it past the filter in the first place. So speaking of the global stripper poll, though, like it's working great for them right now, but AI is getting real good real fast. And so that's not going to be an option for a lot of them, except for like the top performers. And it's just really interesting to see how that will shake out for folks when they're applying for normal jobs again. And then that just pops up when they're doing a search for them.
It just makes me think of South Park. Like, they're taking our gerbs.
They're taking our gerbs. It turns out AI is taking our gerbs. Hey, figure it out. If you're in an industry where AI is coming for you, you might want to go ahead and think about that a little bit. But one last thing to talk about as far as the impact of the internet on dating, I think going back to the whole constantly getting solicited, pumping up people's egos and things of that nature, it ends up creating a junk mail effect where women get so inundated with this on a regular basis that even when they're going on their day-to-day life, they have a more sensitive repulsion to advances in person where they're like, ew, no. And then they go ahead and are willing to be more catty and implement shame much more often, right? Because it reminds me of like all those TikToks where girls are going to the gym and like really scantily clad and then trying to set dudes up for failure. And it's like, that's crazy. But what do you expect? You're setting this up on purpose.
Yeah. It's like, well, if it isn't the consequences of your own actions.
Well, if it isn't the consequences of your own actions. So we talked a little bit about the various ways that kind of the internet is having an effect on dating. So let's talk about how women want this new contract and how they are regularly violating the terms of the contract. So if women want to be liberated from men, that's great. They should go ahead and carry their own weight. Now, let's go ahead and see if they actually are carrying their own weight in society. So I think that in general, women continue to have a dependence on men in a lot of areas, right? Because men provide most of the security services, men provide most of the infrastructure, most of the technological advancements come through the hands of men. And there is a rampant disregard for the fact that all of that exists in our society, because you don't see women signing up to be bricklayers.
We talked about that natural bend kind of thing.
Right. Where you're talking about how women will sign up for jobs, typically speaking, that have to do with people, whereas men will typically sign up for jobs that have to do with things.
Well, also, and their risk management, how like that's why most innovation comes through men. And it not only because like, you know, in centuries past or like in, you know, that women weren't welcome into some of the, you know, different fields where a lot of, you know, new innovations, technology, and all of that stuff came.
Whereas nowadays, I think that there's these people that are, all these institutions are screaming to have women, and they're bending over backwards to go ahead and provide scholarship opportunities for women in STEM and to do preferential hiring in STEM just to get women in, right? And the issue with that is if you just let people go with their choices, they'll find where they want to be. Whereas if you go ahead and necessarily lower standards for people in order to get a certain viewpoint of what diversity should look like in a given area or what a demographic makeup should be in an industry, you're going to end up with a lot of second and third order consequences by the very nature that you'll just have fewer genuinely qualified people to do these things. And that's just what happens in any industry like that, just because there's not enough of them.
Yeah. And I mean, just sitting there holding space for, a female just to have a female, like, what are we doing here?
Well, I mean, if it is the case that it is much more profitable to do so, then it makes all the sense in the world to do that. And I'm not sure that the results of things like DEI have bared out for that, because there have been studies that have been done across S&P 500 companies that had gone the deepest on DEI policies over the last 4 years, that the ones that did it that were still successful, well, they were successful before they did it. And there was virtually no difference in the rate of growth of those companies before or after the DEI. So there was no way to go ahead and associate that level of growth with those actions. So that's something to consider. If we go ahead and look at call-in sick rates, typically women call in sick about 30% more than men. And among childless men and women, it turns out that men work on average 2,088 hours a year, whereas women work an average of 1,811 hours a year. So almost a 10%, well, a little bit more than a 10% difference there in terms of hours worked. So like men are just putting in the time and the effort, whereas women are making different choices. And that's okay. That's kind of their thing, but they can't be too upset with the consequences that come from those choices.
Whether or not it's because they have like a sick kid or blah, 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 and their focus is divided, it's immaterial. It's like, why do the workers who show up have to pick up the slack for that?
Right. Well, and they demand that companies bend over backwards to make concessions for them. And a lot of companies will make concessions just to retain talent. Like, it's incredibly difficult for most law firms to keep a woman past the age of 30. Like, you can have these hard-charging women that make partner before 30, and you'll see them leaving the legal profession in droves. You see the same thing in the military. Like, female officers are leaving the military in droves after the age of 30 and after they go ahead and have their first kid, whereas there are so few female officers at the highest ranks because of that essential conflict that comes about. See, in New Zealand, they did a study where women were net economic contributors for only 15 years on average, whereas men were net economic contributors for 30 years, as in the amount of taxes they paid in were in excess of the benefits that they drew out.
It's in line with that same thing.
It's in line, right? And a lot of times they'll choose to breed with deadbeats, and then they'll require responsible men and other responsible women that are paying taxes in excess of what they're receiving to pay for their bastard but innocent children. They expect other people to pick up the slack. So in those ways, like, yeah, they're liberated, but they're often making choices that do not put them in a position where they are holding up their weight as equal participants in an economy. And it's not just, and I'm not saying that if you went ahead and took out like the homemakers and all of that, that you wouldn't see a huge difference. Of course you would. But if you look at each just individual woman in the working environment, the hours worked and the call-in sick rates are what they are. And so we see that they're just not carrying their end of the bargain if they wanted to be treated as equal in terms of the economy.
It's one thing to want to be equal and be liberated and to, have all the modern things that men do. But in doing so, if you have to have a spouse, have a child, all of that stuff, and then something happens with the spouse and then you are a single parent, you are naturally going to be distracted. And again, we talked about that's the consequences of the choices, rather than if you just really go with if you want to have a family and all of that stuff and you focus on, growing your family and raising kids and all of that stuff, you're not putting, you're letting the other, spouse in the workforce focus fully on their job, again, to not have to pick up slack for other people. And you're not creating that extra vacuum that other people have to fill in and be responsible for.
Sure. So I think that just covering, hey, women aren't picking up the slack in the areas that they have fought for equality for, and they're making intentional choices in such a way that they end up net recipients of taxes instead of net contributors of taxes. That shows a lot about like what their choices actually are in life. And I think that with all of that as a backdrop, I think that generally speaking, women negotiate in bad faith in terms of this new contract that we discussed last time, where even in things like the use of dating apps, a lot of times they just use it for fun rather than actually looking for dates or trying to find a mate. Which, no shade, no tea. Hey, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do that.
Yeah, if you want to be that center of attention and all that stuff, it is readily available for you. Like, go do that.
I think that marriage also is kind of a trap in a lot of ways for secular folks. Like, I can't think of a single justification aside from minor tax benefits as to why marriage is advantageous to a secular guy in today's age.
And even that can be worked around. Like, you can finagle that through, having a tax professional that knows all the ins and outs. And also, like, you don't, especially with, if you have like a marriage license and blah, 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 then all of that end of life situation stuff is already kind of the default, already works itself out. Mm-hmm. But if you just don't need that government piece of paper, you can just go and do, end of life planning, make a will. And it's like, you don't need that part of it.
Right. But that's still, those are workarounds for what marriage does by default. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think there are many justifications out there for secular marriage. Like, I can't think of a reason why it's beneficial to a guy. Like, I understand why, if you're religious, where there's like some sacramental value to it, that's a reason to get married based on what the courts are and how things typically work in family court. It makes sense why a guy would do that in the context of religious adherence, where I don't think a lot of those things that make it worthwhile to a religious guy would make it worthwhile to a secular guy.
Yeah, especially because, just look at human history. Before, the government even got involved, there were marriages before, there were marriages after. Like, there's marriage records from churches. So you don't need
state involvement.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. So here's some things that I would go ahead and recommend to guys to kind of protect themselves in this kind of environment. I would say that expect that at least half the time, if you set up a date, that the woman's going to flake or cancel at the last minute. So don't be surprised. Have a backup plan just in case it happens. It's going to be okay. Probably be a good idea to FaceTime with the girl to ensure that what you see is what you get, because their profile picture may not be accurate.
See red flags.
And you could probably go ahead and see a few red flags running around in their background. And maybe there's other deal breakers that she conveniently left out of her profile that you can see in a quick, 2 to 3 minute FaceTime where you just say, hey, look, I'm looking forward to seeing you tonight. What do you plan on wearing? Yeah, that looks great. Things of that nature. Just something to check in where it's really to be thoughtful and to be a little bit of a detective all at the same time.
Put out the feelers there.
Just because you're doing it with multiple intents doesn't mean that it's negative.
No.
I think that for a first date, it's best to keep it short, simple, and relatively inexpensive, because the level of investment that you provide should be commensurate with the level of effort that they provide, right? And if things click out well, then by all means, go ahead and expand the date. Like, it'd be probably a good idea to have some backup plans in mind just in case things go really well.
Like a modular date.
Yeah. Like, I think that if a dude really likes a girl and when he asks her out, it'd be really nice to go ahead and set up a 3-part date. And you go ahead and you do the first part where it's relatively quick, cheap, and inexpensive. And in the event that things go well, that you move on to step 2 and step 3.
Level 2.
Right.
Level 3.
And you go to different places because it's kind of like having 3 dates in one.
Yeah.
Right. You were There is a transitionary period, whether you're going in an Uber, you get to have these conversations in the ride, between places, the way that you interact with them in terms of like whether you decide to open the door for them and just customs. You can learn a lot in a relatively short amount of time by dealing with normal things associated with like travel and transition, and to see how they're willing to flow with what you've planned for them. Because I think that very few guys do this thing where they think through this and provide an adventure, right? And I think that's just kind of a fun way to do it, where if she shows genuine interest, then you can go ahead and show her the world. And it gives you a natural way to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that also the final thing on protecting yourself in the context of all these things is know when to quit. Because most of the time she's just not that into you. Like if she's in, she's in. And if she's not, move on to the next one. It's okay.
Even especially, the one before it. See, it's like, oh, that's it? That's where you're taking me? Like,
oh, if you get the audacity so right away.
It's like, oh, there it is. Failed out even before level 1.
Right. So if you get the shaming language right away, then you know right away that she wasn't interested in you. She was interested in what you can provide.
Yeah.
Which, don't get me wrong, most women are looking for that. But a lot of times you got to know that you have to earn some of this, right? The guys that are willing to give it out for free are the ones that are going to get taken advantage of. And I would prefer that you didn't get taken advantage of.
I don't think a lot of men really realize that you can dip out.
Yeah, you can end the date. Why not? If things aren't working for you, protect your time. You can go ahead and be a gentleman about excusing yourself. You don't have to go ahead and just go to the bathroom, pay the check and run.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But like conduct yourself like a gentleman, and you can end the date on your timeline rather than on her timeline. Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, I think it's just better for guys and for women to prioritize yourself first and know what you want and know what you're willing to give. If you have done the work to become a captain, see a couple of episodes back where you have built your boat, you learn how to navigate the ship, and you are ready to plot a course, or you have a course plotted, you have a compelling life that some women will want to be a part of. Let them come to you as a natural course of what you do in your social circle and things of that nature. You're going to find it if you've done the work.
Yeah. Know what you're about. Be about it. If they want to come vibe with you, cool. If not, then go about. Vaya con Dios.
Right. Because I would want to impress upon guys to be the kind of flame that would draw beautiful moths.
Pretty moths.
Yeah. Have beautiful moths come and partake of your flame.
Not the train wrecks.
Not the train wrecks. Let them go away. And I think that by having this effort going into becoming a captain and doing all these things necessary to be a captain, it's important that you realize that the benefits should be you primarily, and that the world around you will tangentially benefit from the fact that you've put in the work. Like the woman will go ahead and benefit by having an amazing partner. Your community will benefit by having an amazing contributing member. These are all things why, if men and women prioritize themselves first and understand what is being searched for in the marketplace, they will generally have better results. And if you're acting in accordance with your priorities, you're going to end up with good things normally, or at least things that should line up with your priorities if you've thought them through. What would you think about women dealing in this kind of like marketplace? Because a lot of times they get caught up in a lot of the messaging and the propaganda that's out there.
Yeah. First of all, cut the BS, because just because all of the voices out there are telling you to be a certain way or telling you what's important, really the first stop on the journey to the rest of your life should be taking a look at yourself, really. Not just like, oh, I'm a 10. Okay.
You don't want to do the Delulu thing?
No, please don't. But really figure out, one, where you'd like to go. Like how, again, what your end game is, what you would like your life to look like past the whole, party and, enjoying the fruits of your young beauty and vigor. What would you like your lasting value to be? And then figure out where you're at with that, what you need to improve, what you're doing well. Because, like you're good at stuff and, you need to appreciate that, all of that, self-love and all of that cool in that small dose.
In that context, right?
Yeah.
Where you've actually earned
as
it.
a basis to like self-appreciation, and then as a basis to fuel your kind of chutzpah to self-improve. And in doing so, then you can figure out who you want along for the ride, like who you want to come alongside, who you want to come alongside you, and how you want to structure that. Then go find that person. But if you just figure out, I'm going to do me, I'm going to figure out what works to get me the most of, attention and admiration and all of that stuff, then that's not going to be the stuff that later on you're going to be looking at all those cool little like photos of your girls' trips and all of that stuff going, those were the good old days, with the full understanding in the subtext that that's never going to happen again.
So what do you think about the idea that if a woman wants to find the best mate possible, that there may be some reason to put as much effort into doing that as they would put into finding a job?
Essentially, it is a job interview, really. And paying attention to what you're putting out on social media is part of that, because if companies look at that when you're interviewing for a job, so should the person who's interviewing you for the best job that means the most in your entire life, because the job extends and the benefits of it extend beyond retirement.
Cool.
I look very much forward to my own retirement, being an empty nester, no longer home educating, and like launching well-educated, well-developed children into the world. And hopefully they'll be arrows and not boomerangs.
They're on track to be
They're
arrows now.
doing good. But it's been hard work and more than a decade of careful cultivation. Life is hard. Choose your hard.
Yeah. Okay, so for a quick review, we went ahead and talked about the ugly truth about how women just don't like men as much as men like women. It's just a matter of fact. Like, women don't ask dudes on dates. Dudes ask women on dates. They look at the pretty things, and the things that women want in men are a little harder to find, generally speaking. We talked about the impact of the internet on dating and all kinds of degeneracy that has come up as a result of that. Like the whole internet stripper pole kind of thing and hiring the class of 2025. I also talked about how women want the equality and they want to be out from under the thumb of the patriarchy. They want to be liberated from the patriarchy, but they're not putting in the requisite effort to be equal. And then we talked a little bit about how women, generally speaking, are negotiating in bad faith. And we finished up with a little bit of, hey, what do we do about this? How do we put this together for our benefit? Focus on yourself and your priorities to start. Improve where you need to improve. Do the work. And then go out and find the adventure that you want to have. And that's it. Hey, if you liked what you saw, we would really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, hit subscribe, and tap on that notification bell so that you can be notified when new things come up.